Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. She posted a selfie from the parking lot 20 minutes before she was shot, smiling, glossed lips, high ponytail, captioned with Saturday Reset. 2 hours later, that same image would be used in national headlines to identify a homicide victim, and not just one. Fontana, California, June 21st, 2025. A suburban restaurant strip lit in quiet neon. It was a weekend evening, 9:23 p.m. Families were still finishing dessert inside, waitstaff refilling teas. Then three gunshots shattered the stillness. Witnesses dropped to the floor. Children screamed. And when it was over, two people were down. One man, one woman, shot at close range in a public parking lot. A third man armed was declared deceased on scene, neutralized by an off-duty deputy who happened to be driving by. No one knew yet who any of them were, but one of them, Gloria Zamora, was already familiar to thousands. Gloria wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a fitness influencer with 250,000 followers, a single mother of 7, and a rising figure in Southern California's health and wellness scene. Her TikToks were equal parts workouts and affirmations, carefully lit and edited. But the reality behind the filters had been unraveling long before her final dinner. This case didn't begin in a parking lot. It began weeks before, when Gloria started quietly cutting ties, canceling contracts, changing locks. According to digital logs later obtained by detectives, she'd erased every calendar appointment linked to a shared email on June 12th. On June 14th, she registered for a post office box under a different name. Small acts of distance, tiny red flags. But for anyone paying attention, there was one consistent signal. Gloria was preparing to separate her life from someone else's. At the Fontana Police Department, the initial call was entered as active shooter, 3 down. Officers arrived within 4 minutes. Body cam footage confirmed the deputy had already disarmed the suspect. Emergency personnel administered CPR to the woman, later identified as Zamora, who still had a pulse. The male victim was pronounced dead at the scene. Their car, a white Tesla Model Y, still had its windows down, music softly playing. A takeout order sat on the front seat. Neither victim ever made it home. The shooter's identity was not released immediately. But from the scene, certain facts were logged in forensic sequence. A semi-automatic handgun, 9mm, found 6 feet from the suspect's body. Magazine partially spent. No suppressor, no signs of struggle. Both victims appeared to have been ambushed. The question wasn't only who pulled the trigger, that was immediately apparent. The more urgent question was, why were these two people targeted, and what did the shooter know in advance? What stood out early was how fast the attack occurred. From security camera footage recovered from a dental clinic adjacent to the restaurant, the shooter appeared less than 90 seconds before shots were fired. No verbal altercation was captured, no chase. Just approach, aim, and fire. Tactical, deliberate, clean. The shooting lasted under 8 seconds. The man down next to Gloria was later identified as Hector Garduno, 43, self-employed, divorced, father of 4. According to initial statements from his sister, he was meeting Gloria that evening to discuss a wellness campaign for Hispanic men's health. There were no indications of romantic involvement from either party, though social media would later fuel speculation to the contrary. Fontana PD confirmed the relationship as professional acquaintanceship with some personal familiarity. Preliminary ballistics showed all rounds came from a single weapon. Autopsy results for Hector indicated 2 entry wounds, chest and upper abdomen, both consistent with tight-range discharge. Gloria sustained 1 gunshot wound to the neck, which fractured the C5 vertebra. She went into cardiac arrest en route to the hospital and was pronounced dead at 10:06 p.m. The forensic sweep of the parking lot revealed 2 things that didn't immediately align. First, the shooter's vehicle was not parked nearby. Second, the time-stamped footage from nearby traffic lights showed that he had arrived on foot from a side street, but no pedestrian exits led from that direction. Either he had been dropped off, or he had been waiting. That led investigators to scan for concealed devices in the vicinity. What they found under the Tesla's rear wheel well reframed the investigation. An Apple AirTag, taped beneath the rear panel, untouched, unregistered, and unreported. Detectives traced the serial ID of the AirTag. It had been activated just 5 days prior. The registration led nowhere. Burner Apple ID, prepaid debit card. But it was the forensic fingerprinting on the tag's internal adhesive that provided the first link to someone known to the department. The fingerprint was partial but matched a 2021 misdemeanor arrest record tied to someone connected to Zamora's inner circle. Fontana PD didn't release the name yet, but quietly a pattern was forming. And for the lead detective, a veteran with over 200 domestic cases, one fact was becoming clearer by the hour. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. This was premeditated, and it was personal. One of the responding officers later said in the report, "You could tell she didn't even have time to react. No struggle, no movement. She was turning to unlock her car door when it happened." The Tesla's internal log corroborated that. Her keycard had pinged the driver's side scanner 4 seconds before her biometric failed to register again. It would take weeks to reconstruct the timeline fully, but from the start, the evidence was already doing something unusual. It aligned too cleanly. The gun, the proximity, the device, everything sat in the right place, just the way a procedural checklist would lay it out. And that, according to the department's forensics unit, was precisely what made it unsettling. In most real-world shootings, the lead technician said, you get chaos, missteps, debris, inconsistencies. But here, it was surgical. No fingerprints on the weapon, no phone on the suspect, no ID. It's like the guy didn't intend to walk away. By June 23rd, Gloria Zamora's name was trending on major outlets. From TikTok to NBC Los Angeles, she was being remembered as a voice of empowerment. But behind the headlines, investigators were building something else entirely. A case that didn't just reveal a murder, but exposed how carefully someone had planned it. And for the family she left behind, especially the 7 children now without a mother, no headline could cover what was already unraveling privately. When detectives began to reconstruct the final weeks of Gloria Zamora's life, the details did not come from confessionals or tearful family interviews. They came from metadata. The earliest significant anomaly appeared on June 8, 2025, 13 days before the homicide. Gloria had disabled location tracking on all social apps connected to her personal phone. Not just Instagram or TikTok, also Apple Maps, Gmail, and even her fitness tracker. The forensic team confirmed it was not a system-wide crash or accidental change. It was a deliberate action that required passcode authentication and navigation through 6 separate settings menus. It took less than 5 minutes, but for investigators, it was the first indication that she believed someone was watching. Digital behavior shifts were then cross-referenced with her purchasing history. From June 9th to June 14th, Gloria made 7 separate payments to local contractors, window locks, a P.O. box, and a private attorney specializing in domestic restraining orders. Not one of these transactions was shared on social media. In fact, during this exact time frame, Gloria increased her posting frequency, even uploading a 10-minute motivational clip titled, "Walking into Your Peace No Matter What They Say." But in a deeper dive into the raw footage stored on her cloud drive, investigators found an unedited version of that same video. In the original, Gloria had paused multiple times. At timestamp 0:03:42, she stopped mid-sentence and glanced over her shoulder toward the living room window. No one was visible, but the hesitation was noted by the forensic audio team reviewing background noise. They detected the sound of a car engine idling for over 40 seconds. Contextual interviews confirmed what the evidence already suggested. Gloria was in the process of an exit plan. Her eldest daughter, 18, provided statements under official record, stating that her mother had begun sleeping in the downstairs guest room because she said it felt safer. According to the daughter, Gloria had also instructed the younger children to keep the garage door locked at all times, even when inside. When asked why, she simply said, "It's just better that way for now." This wasn't the behavior of someone experiencing paranoia. It was patterned, calculated risk management, consistent with hundreds of other domestic abuse victims who attempt to leave under escalating threat conditions. It also aligned with data from the Department of Justice. Nearly 65% of intimate partner homicides occur within the first 3 months of physical separation. The week before her murder, Gloria's email inbox received two messages from the San Bernardino County Superior Court. One was a confirmation that her case for an emergency protective order was under review. The second, dated June 17, 2025, was a denial citing lack of immediate evidence of bodily harm or credible threat. No call logs existed to show Gloria followed up. On June 18th, 3 days before the shooting, she withdrew $400 in cash across three separate ATMs under the legal limit requiring ID. It was never deposited into her business account. None of her children reported seeing the money. Investigators suspect it was part of an emergency plan, possibly to secure a short-term rental or legal retainer. On June 19th, she had dinner with Hector Garduno. Surveillance footage from a separate restaurant confirmed the two spoke quietly over sushi. No overt displays of affection, no hand-holding, nothing to suggest romantic involvement. The audio, recorded incidentally by a nearby table for a social post, caught part of their conversation. One phrase was audible: "No, I'm not scared of him. I just don't trust what silence means anymore." That same night, she posted a workout video from her home gym. Her voice was steady, but her Apple Watch logs showed her resting heart rate was elevated 20% above baseline for the entire session. Investigators cross-referenced these signs with Gloria's browsing history. From June 12th to June 20th, she visited 37 different legal websites, watched YouTube content on what to do if someone won't leave, and downloaded 3 separate restraining order templates in PDF. She had not filled out or submitted any of them. The one she had submitted, the one that was denied, was not updated or appealed. In parallel, her vehicle GPS logs showed a new pattern. From June 13th onward, Gloria took different routes to her workplace, even when those paths added over 10 minutes to her commute. Two of her close friends interviewed under subpoena said she believed someone was tailing her, but couldn't prove it. When one suggested going to the police, Gloria reportedly said, "It has to be legal for them to help. Right now, it's just gut feelings." There was no break-in reported, no physical violence recorded, no threatening messages saved. But for anyone trained in the behavioral escalation of domestic control, the signs were textbook. She was being isolated, watched and pressured, all without leaving behind fingerprints. The forensic team did recover one compelling piece of evidence: a deleted video on her iCloud, recovered through cached thumbnail indexing. The video, created on June 20th at 11:47 p.m., shows Gloria sitting in her car. It lasts 58 seconds. In it, she doesn't speak. She looks into the camera, blinks rapidly, then presses stop. That video was never uploaded, never shared. But the metadata confirmed the car was parked outside her own home. She had recorded it while inside the locked garage, alone. Within less than 48 hours, she would be dead. When Fontana PD's forensic unit began processing the crime scene at the sushi restaurant parking lot on the night of June 21st of 2025, they weren't walking into chaos. They were walking into precision. The entire incident, from the arrival of the suspect to the last shot fired, lasted less than 90 seconds. No forced entry, no chase, no vocal confrontation captured on nearby audio. Just 3 people, 2 victims, 1 shooter, and 1 off-duty deputy who happened to be driving by at the exact moment the final round was discharged. Forensic sequencing started with a fixed-point recreation of the attack. Investigators laid out the positions of each body as logged in the initial response photographs, used laser scanning to map out trajectory lines, and synchronized those with external CCTV footage obtained from 2 businesses located across the parking lot. One of the cameras had a partial angle of the suspect's approach. Though grainy and distant, it showed the figure walking directly toward the victims with a purposeful stride, not a run. Weapon already in hand, no hesitation. The ballistic analysis confirmed that Gloria Zamora was shot once at close range, approximately 3 to 4 feet, angled slightly downward. The wound entry was through the right anterior side of her neck, exiting behind her left shoulder. The bullet fractured her 5th cervical vertebra and caused immediate neurogenic shock. According to paramedic logs and the emergency room physician's preliminary assessment, she would have experienced rapid loss of motor function, followed by unconsciousness within 60 seconds. Hector Garduno was shot twice, first in the chest, near the sternum, then again in the abdomen. Forensics indicated the second round was likely fired as he was turning or falling. The shooter did not flee. Instead, he remained in the same approximate position for 5 to 6 seconds before being neutralized by a single shot to the thorax from the off-duty officer's service weapon. The distance between them was approximately 17 feet. That officer's body cam and dashboard camera provided crucial second-by-second context. The handgun recovered at the scene was a Glock 19 Gen 5, semi-automatic, chambered in 9mm, serial number defaced with a rotary tool. The partial serial that remained, along with distinctive striation patterns, matched a weapon reported stolen in Riverside County in early May 2025. According to ATF databases, the weapon had not been used in any previous recorded crimes. Fingerprints were wiped. No DNA matches were obtained from the grip, slide, or magazine, but trace biological matter, specifically shed skin flakes, was detected in the rear sight channel. That material was sent for mitochondrial DNA analysis. Inside the shooter's pockets, no wallet, no phone, no ID. One set of latex gloves, unopened, one burner key fob, a crumpled receipt for a gas station dated June 21st at 5:48 p.m., located 28 miles from the restaurant. Investigators were able to trace that to a nearby convenience store, which had surveillance showing the suspect purchasing a bottle of water and standing at the counter for less than a minute. Silent, alone. Fontana PD worked with the county's mobile forensics unit to recover telemetry from Gloria's Tesla Model Y. Vehicle logs showed the car had arrived at the restaurant at 8:57 p.m. Doors locked automatically at 8:59. Climate control was running at idle. Driver's side door attempted to unlock at 9:23:07, the exact second the audio from a nearby business picked up the first gunshot. Tesla's internal system also recorded the presence of a foreign Bluetooth signal, unpaired but detected, hovering near the vehicle for approximately 9 minutes prior to the shooting. It matched no known devices associated with Gloria's profile. That detail pointed investigators back to the Apple AirTag found under the rear bumper. When that AirTag's ID was submitted to Apple for metadata extraction, the company returned a creation date of June 16, 2025. It had been activated with a temporary iCloud ID tied to a prepaid email account hosted offshore. The activation IP traced back to a public network near Ontario, California, but nothing else led to a specific identity. Still, it confirmed what detectives were already concluding. The attack had been planned, and the victims had been tracked. This was not a random act. Digital positioning software helped reconstruct the shooter's entry point. The CCTV angle and footstep timestamps suggested he had arrived from behind the neighboring dry cleaners. That back alley was not visible from the restaurant, and no security cameras covered it. The alley had access to a side street, typically used for employee parking. That street connected to a larger road system where, later that night, a white sedan was found idling with its engine cold. The vehicle was registered to a rental company in Los Angeles. It had been reported abandoned and towed. No prints, trunk empty, license plate removed. All of this pushed investigators to broaden the timeline. If the suspect had been following Gloria for days and knew her patterns, then this wasn't a crime of opportunity. The planning spanned at least a week, possibly more. The FBI was looped in for behavioral analysis. Their preliminary report noted suspect demonstrated stalking behaviors, resource allocation, tracking device, gloves, burner phone, controlled attack with focused outcome, no effort to escape. Primary motive appears targeted and symbolic. For detectives on the ground, the evidence started to point not just to how, but to who. A name that wasn't new to the Zamora family. A person who had once lived in the same home. Someone Gloria had recently tried to separate from. But that revelation wasn't yet released to the public. The department maintained the working line. The case is active. All parties involved are being vetted. At this stage in the investigation, no official charges could be filed. Because the shooter was deceased, the focus shifted to understanding who knew what and when. An internal audit of 911 logs revealed that no calls had ever been placed by Gloria regarding threats. No prior police reports tied her to the man she had legally separated from earlier in the year, and no friends, when initially questioned, reported being directly warned of a specific threat. Still, the facts now in evidence, digital, ballistic, and behavioral, painted a different picture. Gloria Zamora had done almost everything by the book: attempted legal protection, changed routines, avoided confrontation. But the system built to protect her still hadn't caught up in time. There's a phrase among field investigators: when victims whisper, the system rarely hears. It only listens after a gunshot. In Gloria's case, the whisper had come in the form of an unsubmitted PDF, a deleted video, an unclaimed restraining order request. But the gunshot was the part that made the news. By the afternoon of June 24, 2025, just 3 days after the double homicide outside the Fontana sushi restaurant, the forensic groundwork had stabilized. Scene reconstruction, ballistic confirmation, and physical evidence analysis were complete. Now came the next layer: behavioral and digital profiling. The shooter's identity, though not released publicly at that stage, was known internally. His history had intersected with Gloria Zamora's in clear, legally documented ways. Their relationship had included periods of cohabitation, business involvement, and at one point, shared custody arrangements with Gloria's younger children. There was no record of formal marriage. But in practical terms, the connection had been domestic and sustained. What emerged next was not a single trigger, it was a progression. And it began long before Gloria changed her locks or disabled location tracking. Investigators began pulling archived communications from both parties, reviewing subpoenaed messages, court filings, and digital patterns that painted a picture of escalation, not rupture. The earliest signal dated back to January 2025. Gloria had begun separating joint financial accounts. Transaction records showed repeated attempts by the suspect to access business funds from her LLC using expired credentials. Several failed logins were traced to his personal device. On January 17th, her account administrator flagged unauthorized activity and froze the backend system. Internal emails recovered through a digital warrant showed that Gloria had instructed her assistant to change every password and never give them out again, no matter who asks. She didn't name him directly, but the digital fingerprint left behind was clear. Between February and April 2025, surveillance logs from the gated housing community where Gloria lived documented the suspect's car plate entering on 6 separate occasions. Each time, the gate entry code used was old, previously valid, but since replaced. On April 11th, the system denied the plate, and he was turned away. 3 days later, a maintenance request was filed by Gloria for what she described as deep scratches on her garage door. Police were not called. No report was filed. That silence would become a pattern in itself. In May, Gloria opened a new email account unlinked to her public platforms. The forensics team used recovery metadata to uncover its contents. The inbox contained draft letters to an attorney. One read, "I don't know if I'm overreacting, but I keep waking up at 3 a.m. thinking I heard footsteps." The email was never sent. The last edit was on May 28th. The investigative team then turned to network behavior, IP logs, device IDs, and location pings. The suspect's devices had previously been synced with Gloria's home Wi-Fi. Forensic logs confirmed that after the desync in March, there were at least 5 passive attempts to reconnect, all unsuccessful. But in early June, a new device, a refurbished iPhone registered to a prepaid SIM, did connect briefly to the network for exactly 2 minutes and 34 seconds. That was enough to pull cached data. That phone was later recovered inside the abandoned rental vehicle used the night of the shooting. The metadata had been partially wiped, but GPS recovery software located 2 significant pings, one near Gloria's house on June 12th and the other at a shopping center 1 block from the sushi restaurant, time-stamped June 18th. This was not surveillance from a distance. It was movement, proximity, persistence. From a behavioral perspective, the FBI profiler assigned to the case described the pattern as goal-directed escalation with cognitive rehearsal. That is, the suspect was not lashing out randomly. He was rehearsing, repeating steps, refining access points, and gradually moving toward direct confrontation. The presence of the AirTag under Gloria's car, taped neatly, battery intact, was not the beginning of the stalking behavior. It was the culmination. He had attempted to stay digitally tethered after being physically excluded. When that failed, he opted for analog substitutes: proximity, line of sight, physical tracking. What made this case particularly alarming for investigators wasn't just the motive or the method, it was the profile mismatch. The suspect had no major criminal record, No prior arrests for domestic violence, only a single 2021 citation for verbal misconduct during a traffic stop. No court-ordered counseling, no weapons charges, no psychiatric holds. Yet his planning matched that of a seasoned offender. And his final actions, cold, controlled, public, suggested a total psychological break that had occurred long before the crime itself. One unsettling detail emerged from social media forensics. In the weeks leading up to Gloria's murder, the suspect's old Instagram account had become active again, despite no public posts. It was used to view only one account, Gloria's. Investigators discovered that at 9:04 p.m., on the night of the homicide, 19 minutes before the first shot, he had viewed her latest story, the one with her smiling in the parking lot, the last photo she would ever take. That timestamp wasn't theoretical. It came from Instagram's server log, matched to a specific IP address now tied to the prepaid phone recovered from the scene. No comment was left. No message was sent. Just the digital equivalent of watching and waiting. From a procedural standpoint, this data set filled a critical gap in the timeline. It showed that not only had the suspect premeditated the encounter, he had confirmed her location in real time, using her own online activity. In the digital age, sometimes a last-seen notification isn't just an app feature. It's a window. The final profile draft submitted by the FBI to Fontana PD included one closing remark, brief but chilling. Subject had full situational awareness. Intent was not confrontation, it was termination. By June 25, 2025, the working theory of the case had shifted. This was no longer treated as a domestic dispute turned violent. It was reclassified internally as a targeted domestic assassination, executed in public, planned using digital surveillance, and carried out with intent to eliminate, not to warn. By June 25, 2025, investigators had exhausted the outer circle, the scene, the weapons, the digital traces. But what remained unexamined, at least publicly, was what took place behind the closed doors of Gloria Zamora's home in the weeks, even months before the shooting. It's where the context of this case shifted from procedural to personal. The forensic data had already confirmed deliberate tracking, but inside the house there was no crime scene. No broken locks, no documented domestic disputes. The only record that mattered was memory, especially from those who had lived in the same space. Gloria's eldest daughter, Jailin, became the primary witness to those interior days. She was 18, legally an adult, and had remained close to Gloria as both daughter and assistant in managing the influencer's brand. She had access to her mother's private devices, knew her filming schedule, and was present during several incidents that, while not reportable in a legal sense, had left emotional residue that couldn't be ignored. According to her signed interview transcript, collected by Fontana PD on June 24th, Jaslyn recalled a noticeable change in her mother's demeanor starting around March 2025. Gloria had stopped filming at home in the evenings. She took all video calls from her car. She stopped answering her phone if the caller wasn't saved as a known contact. More significantly, Gloria began separating herself from her children's routines. She no longer did school pickups. She avoided group outings. At first, Jaslyn assumed this was fatigue, but the pattern sharpened. She reported waking up multiple times around 2 or 3 a.m. to the sound of Gloria moving through the house, checking windows, turning off outdoor lights, sitting in the kitchen without speaking. None of it looked like a crime, but all of it felt like one waiting to happen. There was no physical violence, no shouting, no visible bruises. What existed instead was psychological compression, like something pressing down on Gloria from above. She would often say things like, "I'm just tired of being watched," or, "He doesn't need to be here to be in the room." Jaslyn later said she didn't fully understand those comments until the night her mother didn't come home. The investigative team cross-referenced Jaslyn's account with smart device logs inside the house. A connected home system revealed that motion sensors in the hallway and backyard had spiked in activity from mid-April through early June, particularly between midnight and 4 a.m. The family dog, usually crated in the garage, had been moved into the upstairs hallway around that time. No specific threats were recorded, just changes in behavior. Forensic psychology teams reviewing the case highlighted a key insight. In high-control relationships, victims often preempt escalation by limiting friction points. Gloria had, according to the behavioral report, disengaged from direct confrontation as a survival tactic, choosing instead to quietly build distance, digitally, legally, and physically. That tactic, while rational, is often misunderstood by those outside. Friends interviewed post-mortem expressed confusion. "She looked like she was doing better," one said. "I thought things were turning around." And that's part of the tragedy. Victims who appear composed are often the ones in most danger, because they've stopped seeking help and started preparing for impact. What Gloria never did was tell her children what she feared. There was no manifesto, no written plan, not even a video goodbye. She didn't frame herself as a victim because that wasn't how she lived. Instead, she worked harder, posted more, smiled brighter. She chose forward motion even while knowing something, or someone, was closing in. In reviewing Gloria's final 72 hours, a chilling fact emerged. She had booked a consultation with a private security firm in West Covina. The appointment was scheduled for June 24th, 3 days too late. She never got to explain why. By the time the final shot was fired in that Fontana parking lot on June 21st, 2025, it was already too late for the system to intervene. The decisions that sealed Gloria Zamora's fate had been made long before, across desks, inboxes, and intake forms. The protective order she filed on June 15th was entered into the San Bernardino County civil docket by 3:37 p.m. that same day. It was flagged as an emergency request for temporary restraining order. Gloria had checked the box indicating fear of continued harassment, surveillance, and threats. In the narrative field, she wrote, "I believe he is watching me. I don't feel safe at home or at work. I have changed all my passwords and locks. I need space and safety." She attached no photographic evidence, no police reports, no medical documentation, no witness affidavits. The request was reviewed on June 17th and denied less than 24 hours later. The official note read, "Insufficient evidence of imminent threat. No documented history of abuse." From a legal standpoint, that was consistent with California's Family Code Section 6320, which requires demonstrable threat or past violence to justify emergency orders without a hearing. Gloria had none of those. What she had was fear, rational, measured, and invisible on paper. Investigators later confirmed that the rejection email went to her spam folder. She never saw it. The case file for her application was recovered during forensic review of her email and iCloud accounts. The rejection was time-stamped but unopened. She had, by all available evidence, believed it was pending. She continued documenting incidents privately. Screenshots of strange calls, photos of unfamiliar vehicles near her house, but never submitted them. Maybe she was waiting for an escalation, or maybe she assumed escalation had already begun. At the institutional level, no one flagged the pattern. Gloria was not known to the local police. There were no prior 911 calls involving her residence, no prior civil disputes with the suspect on record, and no CPS reports related to her children. In every system that could have protected her, she was effectively invisible. After the homicide, Fontana PD initiated an internal audit of all restraining order applications filed in the first half of 2025. Gloria's was one of 47 emergency requests denied on first review due to lack of documentation. Of those, hers was the only one that ended in a double homicide. But it wasn't just the restraining order system that failed her. She had reached out to 2 separate domestic violence support hotlines in May, according to toll-free call logs linked to her phone number. One of those calls lasted less than 6 minutes. The transcript, obtained with consent from the hotline operator, included phrases like, "He hasn't hurt me, but he's around all the time," and "I think he's listening through something in the garage." Because she did not report active abuse or explicit threats, the call was not escalated. She was given a list of counseling resources and advised to call police if anything physical occurred. That was the protocol. The broader reality is that Gloria's case didn't fall through the cracks. It never fit the outline. In post-incident analysis, a representative from the California Coalition Against Domestic Violence stated, "She did everything the way we tell people to: change passwords, secure housing, document behavior, reach out." The issue isn't that she didn't follow the system. The issue is that the system doesn't activate until a crime has already occurred. And in this case, activation came at gunpoint. Investigators submitted a formal policy memo to state-level legal counsel on June 26th, recommending the review of temporary protective order thresholds for victims reporting digital stalking and coercive control, even in the absence of physical abuse. They cited Gloria Zamora's case by name. For the families left behind, policy reviews are little comfort. But for those in similar danger now, those planning exits, changing routines, switching phone numbers, the case has become a symbol of what's not visible in official data. Gloria's story isn't only about a victim and a perpetrator. It's about the invisible prelude to violence, the narrow line between fear and eligibility, and the dangerous space where victims are still told they're overreacting. Within 24 hours of the Fontana shooting, Gloria Zamora's name was trending across national platforms, not as a crime statistic, but as a face, a headline, a symbol. The public framing began with local news stations. The first television report aired the morning of June 22, 2025, labeling the incident as a domestic disturbance turned deadly. The anchor read from a script over aerial footage of police tape. A woman, a man she was meeting for dinner, and an alleged ex-partner, killed in a tragic confrontation. It was passive, sanitized, generic. But within hours, the narrative was corrected, first by Gloria's followers, then by verified reporters. Screenshots of her last Instagram post began circulating, her sitting at an outdoor table, chopsticks in hand, with the caption, "Reset." One comment, time-stamped minutes before the shooting, read, "You look so happy here. Stay strong, mama." This wasn't a story about a love triangle. It was about tracking, about digital surveillance, about a woman who had warned people in quiet ways that never got loud enough until it was too late. National media picked it up fast. By June 23rd, NBC, People magazine, and ABC News had published full breakdowns of the case, using verified sources, family interviews, and police briefings. Gloria's identity shifted from local fitness coach to mother of 7, influencer, targeted in public. The term domestic assassination began to appear in headlines. What the coverage did, intentionally or not, was redefine the scope of domestic violence to include what happens before a physical altercation. The stalking, the surveillance, the erasure of boundaries without any fingerprints. Gloria's case became a real-time case study in how modern coercive control can be carried out in silence, with apps, proximity, and legal ambiguity. Her daughter, Ghislaine, made a brief statement to local press. She didn't talk about grief. She didn't use the word victim. She said she did everything she could. She had a plan. She tried. That should have been enough. That line was quoted in dozens of articles. It became the banner for digital advocacy groups and survivor organizations. Within 2 days, Justice for Gloria had appeared over 80,000 times across social platforms. The framing no longer relied on what law enforcement could prove. It relied on what Gloria's followers and friends had seen in hindsight. By June 24th, online petitions began circulating, demanding a state-level policy shift on restraining orders and digital stalking recognition. Gloria's story wasn't just being memorialized, it was being mobilized. But public awareness doesn't always mean public understanding. Certain online voices mischaracterized the incident, speculating about relationships and motives. One anonymous thread reposted the video of the shooting from a dash cam, framing it as a jealous ex confronting betrayal. That framing was quickly debunked, but the damage echoed. It demonstrated how easily domestic violence cases are still misread, especially when the violence doesn't fit a Hollywood model of bruises and restraining tape. Gloria's case was different. The crime wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. The killer knew where she would be. He knew what she'd be wearing. He confirmed it through her own story post. The public didn't just learn about her death. They watched the conditions that led to it, posted in real time. In response to the coverage, the California State Assembly issued a statement acknowledging the case's unique complexity and confirming that discussions were underway to reassess the guidelines surrounding emergency protective orders based on digital coercion. The Fontana Police Department, under growing scrutiny, clarified that no restraining order had been served at the time of the homicide because the initial request was rejected. That admission, while factually correct, became a focal point for activists who argued that systems built to protect should account for evolving threat patterns, especially when victims don't fit the mold of in crisis. Gloria wasn't in crisis. She was calculated. She moved quietly. She minimized risk, and it didn't save her. For many, her story redefined the timeline of domestic violence, not starting with bruises, but with texts that don't feel right, cars parked a few houses down, devices that buzz at 3 a.m. without explanation. The public didn't just mourn her. They recognized her. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in tone. After months of hearings, delays, pretrial motions, and endless chains of evidence being re-verified, the trial of Michael LeClaire opened to a public that had already drawn conclusions. But law doesn't operate on public opinion. It requires proof. The prosecution came to the floor methodically. Their case was not built on spectacle, but precision. Forensic analysts were among the first to testify. They walked the jury through each element of physical evidence collected. The blood spatter patterns consistent with close-range gunshots. The bullet trajectory from the basement stairwell up through the muscle and bone of Danise's neck. The basement had become a sealed timeline. Her final moments were written in trace blood droplets, shell casings, and a fractured cervical vertebra. The forensic pathologist confirmed what the crime scene hinted at. This was not self-defense. This was not chaos. This was control. Digital forensic teams were next. They showed how Michael's phone had been in airplane mode for a critical window of time on the night of the murder. Security footage from neighboring properties captured nothing because no one else had come or gone. His internet history from the week prior revealed disturbing searches. How long to hide a body in a freezer? Do bullet wounds bleed in cold storage? How to clean blood off concrete? None of it was speculative. The timestamps aligned with the night he killed Danise. But what moved the needle was the silence. Danise's phone had gone dark around 9:42 p.m. on February 13, 2024. Her texts to friends had abruptly stopped. Her mother testified that they'd had a video call earlier that evening, and Danise seemed tense, but said nothing outright. She promised to call back. She never did. Michael, when questioned later, couldn't explain why he'd told multiple people that Danise left him or had taken off with someone, despite the fact that her keys, wallet, purse, and ID were all in the house. Her car hadn't moved. Her work supervisor said she never called in. The story didn't track. Then came the freezer. The discovery of Danise's body inside a secondhand deep freezer in the basement of the home she shared with Michael was the linchpin of the prosecution's case. It wasn't just that her body was hidden, it was how it was preserved. The freezer had been moved from one side of the basement to another during the investigation. Detectives had noticed this in photographs taken days apart. That motion, combined with the freezer's sudden purchase just 2 weeks prior to her death, suggested premeditation. The defense tried to discredit that claim. They argued that Michael had bought the freezer for bulk groceries. They insisted the couple had been arguing, that the gun had gone off during a struggle, and that he panicked. They claimed the concealment of the body was not malicious, but desperate, a man afraid of being misunderstood. But there was no evidence of a struggle, no defensive wounds on Michael, no blood outside of a tightly confined pattern, and no logical explanation for the time delay between the shooting and when he finally called police, 5 full days later, after her mother had already reported her missing. Even without a confession, the story had already told itself. Sentencing. In April 2025, the jury found Michael LeClaire guilty of second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. He received a sentence of 40 years to life in prison. The court offered no possibility of parole before 2049. No dramatic outburst occurred at sentencing. Michael stared ahead, silent. His only words were a monotone, "I understand," when the judge asked if he had anything to say. Danise's family gave no lengthy statement. Her mother simply said, "You cannot bury the truth in ice." The judge noted the deliberate effort to mislead investigators, the isolation in which Danise died, and the lack of remorse. This was not only a murder, he said, this was a disposal of a human being as though she were refuse. The broader cost, what haunted many was not just the violence, but how long it took to uncover the truth. Friends of Danise came forward during the trial to express guilt. Some admitted they'd seen signs: emotional withdrawal, sudden changes in behavior, stress, secretiveness, but didn't intervene. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how. Domestic violence, particularly in long-term cohabiting relationships, often hides in plain sight. Michael LeClaire had no major criminal record. He had a full-time job. Neighbors called him quiet, but behind closed doors, silence became weaponized. Cases like this remind us that violence isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's built over time, layer by layer, until control is complete and escape becomes impossible. By the time someone goes missing, the violence has already reached its peak. The forensic evidence may have closed this case, but Daniel's story lives on in court training manuals, domestic violence seminars, and community programs aiming to teach early detection. That, in some quiet but powerful way, may be the only form of justice capable of reaching beyond the prison cell. I've told you this story not just to recount what happened, but to remind you of something we too often forget. Silence can be fatal. Danielle didn't get the help she needed in time, and by the time the freezer door shut, it was already too late. If you ever sense something's wrong, in your life or someone else's, don't wait. Speak up. Ask twice. Show up. And if you've walked through something like this yourself, know that survival is not weakness, it's power. What do you think this case says about the way we treat warning signs? Have you ever missed one or wished you'd acted sooner? Let's talk about it in the comments. Your voice could help someone else. If this story moved you or made you think, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't enjoy the video, I'd still love to hear why and where you tuned in from. We're building this space to share truth, grow stronger, and never look away from the hard things. If you made it this far, consider subscribing to the channel. There are more real stories ahead, stories that matter.